Hey everyone, Eterna here. Canada's Wonderland is my home park, and I've been visiting it my entire life. This park is the home of 18 roller coasters, leaving it in the top 3 for biggest amusement parks in the world. But how good are those 18 roller coasters compared to each other? Some of them are very different from traditional coasters, and while some of them are also classics. Join me as I rank the 18 roller coasters of Canada's Wonderland. Number 18, Flight Deck. Let's start off with some obvious picks. At the bottom we have Flight Deck, one of the worst coasters in the entire world. Take every bad Vekoma SLC and amp it up and then you get Flight Deck. Headbanging, roughness, and pain is all I think about whenever I think of this ride. The only SLC I've been on that's worse than Flight Deck is Limit at Haida Park. 17, Taxi Jam, and 16, Silver Streak. Taxi Jam at 17 and Silver Streak at 16 will be the kiddie coaster lightning round of this video. There isn't much to say here as both are rides for kids. Taxi Jam is the traditional wooden coaster of the park, and Silver Streak is the park's Vekoma suspended family coaster. 15, Time Warp. A lot of people were probably expecting this ride to be at the very bottom of this list at number 18, but I don't really think it's a horrible ride, just very, very mediocre. I never really get any pain on Time Warp, especially nowhere near the pain I get on Flight Deck. One of the many problems of this ride is just that it does nothing, and while the spiral lift is cool, that's about the only cool thing about this ride. And also, for a lot of people, yes, this ride is pretty painful for them, and while I said that it's not like that for me, it is still the case for a lot of riders. Also, who wants to ride a roller coaster in a cage anyways? Number 14, Fly. Fly is Canada's Wonderland's traditional wild mouse coaster. Not much to say here, but it's definitely a solid ride for what it is. It's worth noting that Fly usually gets a long line, and there's no fast lane line, so if you're visiting and trying to get on every roller coaster in the park, make this one of the first coasters you ride. Number 13, Snoopy's Racing Railway. This is the only ride on this list that I haven't been on, but I did watch this ride's construction, and I spoke to several people who have been on it before I made this ranking. The theming looks good, and it's fun for the target audience. Of course, ultimately, it's a kid or family coaster, but it does more than the typical kiddie coasters you see around like Taxi Jam. It's one of 2 launched coasters in the whole entire country, but we have a third on the way this year in Vancouver. Number 12, The Bat. The typical Vekoma boomerang makes it up to 12th place. The Bat has its place in the park's lineup, and it's the coaster in the park that goes backwards. The Bat brings you up before you go upside down a few times and you do it all again backwards. There isn't much to say about this ride, and it's a pretty short experience, but it's also one of the only rides in the park that have a single rider line, so that's pretty cool to know. Number 11, Thunder Run. At 11 is shockingly enough a kiddie coaster, but this one's just cool enough to land right outside of the top 10. Thunder Run does 2 laps through Wonder Mountain, the centerpiece of Canada's Wonderland. The ride is good, especially for a kiddie coaster, and the atmosphere is a lot of fun. The inside of the mountain also has some cool props and effects. Make sure to look out for Herman the Dragon on the inside. Starting off the top 10 of the list is Ghoster Coaster. Ghoster Coaster is a family wooden coaster, and the first of Canada's Wonderland's 3 wooden coasters on this list. I don't have much to say on this ride because I think I've only been on it about twice in the past 5 years, but from what I remember, it's solid for what it is. And at the end of the day, it's an old family wooden coaster. It definitely doesn't compare to the modern day family wooden coasters, but it was probably good for the era it opened in. Number 9, Wonder Mountain's Guardian. This ride is pretty unique. Guardian starts off as a roller coaster before throwing you into Wonder Mountain, where you use guns on your ride vehicle to shoot down the enemies on screens on your journey to slay a dragon. If this list was made back when it opened, it would probably be a few spots higher, but over time this ride has gotten worse and worse, from issues like the amount of guns not working, to the park just flat out removing the 3D from the ride. At least the ending is somehow one of the best elements on any roller coaster in the entire country. Number 8, Dragonfire. From one Dragonfire themed ride to another, Dragonfire is one of the coasters that originally opened with the park in 1981. This ride is also known as the sibling to Big Loop at Haida Park over in Germany, as the rides share the same layout, except Big Loop just goes in the other direction at the turnaround. Dragonfire may be old, but it's still a solid ride that pulls some nice forces. The loops are good, and as long as you brace yourself for the transitions, the corkscrews could also be pretty fun. It's a simple layout, but it makes for a solid coaster. Number 7, Backlot Stunt Coaster. Backlot Stunt Coaster is currently one of only 2 launch coasters in Canada. Backlot launches you from 0 to 40 miles per hour in 3 seconds, before throwing you into an upwards forceful helix. Needless to say, it's a pretty forceful combination of elements. Unfortunately, this version of Backlot just doesn't have the effects working, like the other backlots at sister parks Kings Island and Kings Dominion. Even without the effects, it's still a great and solid ride, deserving of number 7 on this list. Number 6. Wild Beast. I know this placement is a surprise to a lot of viewers. Wild Beast is one of 2 thrill wooden coasters at Canada's Wonderland. Because of the ride's roughness, Wild Beast usually finds its way near the lower end of people's rankings for the park, but I think it deserves to be in the top half. Why? I just think this ride is fun. I may be a bit weird here, but I honestly think that Back Row Wild Beast is loads of fun. It may be rough, but for me it's just the kind of roughness that makes roller coasters more fun, unlike the roughness on the next ride on this list. Number 5. Behemoth. I know it's a hot take, especially for people who haven't been on this ride after 2020, but hear me out for a second. If we were talking about before 2021, then yes, this ride is so easily in the top 3 of this park, but something happened. And now it's a rough and rattly coaster that gives me a headache worse than what I could get on some of the worst wooden coasters I've ever been on. Even compared to the wooden coasters here at Canada's Wonderland, which, keep in mind, are known for being rough. Also, for some reason, post-COVID, when the park opened again, this thing has been trimming way harder than it did before, and you feel those trims, and it really impacts the ride. For example, if you rode Behemoth before 2020 and again after 2020, you will notice a huge difference in how fast the ride feels, and the whole experience just feels different now. The layout is pretty much the perfect hypercoaster. It should give you a lot of airtime, but now it's just not as good as it used to be. Nowadays, whenever I visit the park, I usually skip and actually avoid Behemoth, and would usually rather ride the next coaster on this list. Number 4. Mighty Canadian Mindbuster. This is just as much of a hot take as Behemoth being at number 5, but I love this ride. Is it smooth? No. Does it feel like it's trying to kill you? Yes. Is it just a lot of fun? Also yes. Mighty Canadian Mindbuster is one of those rides that just throws you around, and it pulls some surprising forces in areas you just don't expect. The drop is a lot of fun, especially towards the back of the ride vehicle, and you get some really surprising airtime right after that. And that airtime might just be better than any of the airtime on Behemoth. If you don't mind the roughness and want to make the ride a bit more fun, sit in the back or second back row. If you want a less rough and probably overall better experience, go for row 2 near the front of the car. I usually try my best to sit in the very back row. So why am I putting this rough ride above Behemoth, which I was just giving a lower ranking partially for also being rough? Well, it's hard to explain, but the type of roughness on Mindbuster is just more fun than the type of roughness you get on Behemoth. Behemoth has a type of roughness that gives you a headache, while Mindbuster just throws you around a bit. But now we're getting to the top 3 coasters. And before we get there, comment down below how you would rank the roller coasters at Canada's Wonderland. With that, let's get to the top 3. Number 3. Vortex. Vortex is arguably the best currently operating suspended coaster in the world. This ride brings you up to the top of Wonder Mountain, before dropping you off the side, sending you swinging from side to side. The interaction with the area is awesome, from gliding above water to circling around Yukon Striker's drop. When people talk about the rides they want to do at this park, they always bring up Leviathan, Yukon Striker, and Behemoth. But Vortex is somehow always forgotten. When you visit Canada's Wonderland, you do not want to miss out on this amazing ride. Number 2. Yukon Striker. You could really make an argument for Yukon Striker being the best dive coaster in the entire world. It doesn't have the theming of Baron 1898 or the more free restraints of SheiKra, but it has what just might be the best layout on any dive coaster. The drop into the tunnel is incredible, and the following series of elements is unrelenting. People say Boligar and Mabillard can't make forceful coasters, but this one is definitely up there and is pretty forceful. Yukon Striker stands tall as the tallest, longest, and fastest dive coaster in the whole world, and it looks like it'll probably hold on to those records for a bit longer. Number 1. Leviathan. I think everybody knew this would be at the top of the list. Leviathan is the only roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland to reach my top 50 coasters list, and it currently sits at number 23. Leviathan is Canada's only Giga coaster, and it's potentially the best coaster in the country as well. And it stands 306 feet tall. This whole ride is pretty solid, and it's a great experience. After the massive drop and turnaround, you go into a speed hill, and this thing gives some pretty insane airtime. Next is a big airtime hill before the turnaround that begins the return trip. It's worth noting that pretty much every bit of airtime on this ride is good, and there are some incredible airtime moments on Leviathan like the speed hill. After the turnaround, you get one more airtime hill and then the ride ends. So what makes this ride so good? It's a combination of scale, speed, and elements. While some people call this ride bad in comparison to its sister coaster, Fury 325, it's still a solid ride that does what it does well. You really feel the speed on Leviathan. And while it's not the craziest airtime in the world, those airtime moments stand out and catch you by surprise every time. Those are my rankings for the 18 roller coasters at Canada's Wonderland. If you want to watch me rank a bunch of parks in Japan, click on this video to the left here. I have been Eterna. Peace.